month we have a featured reader. I think I recognize most faces here, but each month we have a featured reader that comes up and reads some of their work in this supportive environment as part of the community. And before I introduce our reader, I'm going to remind everyone, please silence your phones. Aha, I got a few of you, didn't I? Okay. So this month we have Kiyomi Appleton Gaines. She is a writer of fairy tales and other fantastical things whose stories have been said to cause nightmares. She was a contributor to the 2023 collection Unquiet Spirits, Essays by Asian Women in Horror, and to Mad Scientist Journal 2019 Spring Quarterly. In 2018, she was contributing editor at Enchanted Conversation, a fairy tale magazine. Her work has also appeared in Nightmare Magazine, Quail Bell Magazine, and The Grim Reaper, among others. Kiyomi is an Asian American of Japanese descent and works as a copywriter and resume writer, helping others tell their stories and connect with their ideal clients. You can find more of her writing at workofheartkag.com. Please welcome Kiyomi.
Thank you. Hi, I'm Kiyomi Appleton Gaines. I have a small ebook of 12 original stories that I will send to you. If you would like that, if you enjoy my reading, you can sign up for my email list in the back. Once your email is confirmed, I will send that to you. This is a hybrid piece that is a combination of a couple of essays that I wrote a few years ago about my grandmother on the occasion of her death. When grief never really leaves us, it kind of shifts shape. So this is when Red left the house. When Red Riding Hood left the house, the wind was tugging at the laundry on the line. I'm grieving my grandmother. It's like a small tug on something inside me, a small ache there in my chest. I feel like some line that connected me back to the history of mankind has broken and needs to be repaired. And right now, I'm still floating, loose. Not floating away, just hanging, suspended, and waiting for the connection to be reformed. There were a lot of conversations I wanted to have with her. I did not have the expectation of them, but I liked to hear her talk about people and things and places I was connected to because of her. It was alien and distant, but something still I could lay claim to because of her, as her descendant. Now I have no proof because she's gone. It wasn't like a tear, a wound, no violent bleeding thing, this. More like a sudden void, an absence. Not too heavy to bear, but noted. Some new gravity in the rotation of what it means to be me. She was what made me Japanese, and now she is gone. I feel alienated from myself. My house does not look like a Japanese home the way my mother's does, and my face doesn't either. When Red Riding Hood walked back toward the village through the woods, the sun was shining, the breeze was gentle, the day was bright. Grandma died last night, my mom said on the phone. I finally cried when the boxes came, boxes full of her jewelry, earrings, teacups, a scarf, her calligraphy set, washi paper. She was fine. I just talked to her and she was fine, Mom said. They were planning a trip I thought I would join them on. We would travel together back to my Gram's hometown. Together. I would meet her brother, her nieces. I hadn't spoken to her in I was complimented once on how well I used hashi by a kindly proprietor of a restaurant. I smiled and ducked my head while my mother expressed her thanks on my behalf. Yet I felt that shame of being so out of place, singled out as other, as not belonging, at a table with my own mother and siblings. I'm Japanese, I thought. They would never recognize you as Japanese in Japan, my mom told me when I was young. It didn't help that she said she could never be Japanese either. People recognized her right to her heritage. I was named interloper. I've started to reclaim it as an adult. Still, it hurts when people say unintentionally unkind things. You're just white, from a more Asian friend. Kiyomi is a Hawaiian name. It's my niece's name, but it's spelled differently, from a non-Asian coworker. Your parents must have been hippies, from an acquaintance. The bite of these things lingers. Other comments echo in my brain, still raw and upsetting. I try to be diplomatic. I'm Japanese, I think, and sometimes say, oh, part, some will concede. Oh, your mother's half, so that makes you. And they look at me, and I can tell they are thinking, white. Were you close? People keep asking me, and it makes it worse somehow. I don't know how to answer what that question even means. The words do not make any sense in my brain. Were we close? She was my grandmother. We lived together when I was younger. She was a Japanese grandmother. I was an American teenager. I am Japanese. I am. I am other things, but this too is mine to lay claim to, who I am. Without equivocation or caveat, it's mine. I don't have to look a certain way for that to be true. I don't have to carry with me all of the cultural signifiers to prove it. I want to shout these things. I still don't know what to say. Her heart just gave out, Mom said. Confused, Red Riding Hood walked away from the house, back toward the village. I hugged her, held her small body close briefly to mine. Everything about me that is Japanese comes from her. I kissed her cheek. I love you, Graham. I'll see you next time. When I opened the boxes, it smelled like her house, and I cried. My Graham is gone, I said, stupidly, needlessly. You're still Japanese, my mom would say to me. Mine to claim, because it is hers, and I am hers. Mine to claim, and she would defy anyone who might suggest otherwise with that withering stare that other Asian children will know well. My mom points out others like me in restaurants. They're at least a quarter, she'll assert with absolute confidence, of someone with lighter hair and more tattoos. It's a concession I'm learning to make, to accept, to be this Sansei generation Asian American. I know there are more out there like me, invisible children who go to cultural events and are marked as strangers, to restaurants and get complimented on how they hold their hashi, and questioning looks or gentle cautions when they order off of the traditional menu. Others who also have to navigate what it means when our connection to that other place, looming and important and abstract and storied all at once, is severed. I expected to see her again. I suppose we always do. I don't feel regret because there was no opportunity dismissed. There was nothing left unsaid, but I miss her. Obon, the Japanese festival to honor ancestors, ended about a week ago. It's more of a season than a date because of the way the lunar and solar calendars fail to line up. It started right after Graham passed away. It's maybe right to have this period of saying goodbye happen when her ancestors, my ancestors, are traditionally remembered. She doesn't feel like an ancestor yet, and I am still floating, untethered. When she came up the path to the familiar, neat little house, the laundry swayed on the line. Everything was just as she remembered it, all in its place. But when the woodcutter broke through the door and she could finally look into the house, it was empty. No Wolf and no Graham. I still don't know what to say. She was just gone. Thank you.
That was beautiful, Kiyomi. Thank you very much. Kiyomi has a piece in the Central Oregon Writers Guild Anthology 2024, as do many of you. It's gone through final edits and will be released on November 28th at Roundabout Books. I'm not exactly sure of the time, like 5 or 6, I think, but we'll post that and we'll send an email out for that. If you would like, if you're at home and you want to sign up for Kiyomi's mailing list, send an email to Central Oregon Writers Guild at gmail.com and we'll forward that on to Kiyomi, okay? All right, our presenters tonight, Amanda and Aaron Johnson. What if story is the answer to our crisis of meaning and belonging, to our impulse to heal our lives and help others, to our desire to leave the world better than we found it? Story is one of the oldest and most powerful vehicles we have available to us. Because no one has taught us how to use story, we unwittingly let it shape us instead of using our story intentionally to reshape our personal and collective experience. After more than 15 years of guiding aspiring and seasoned messengers from inspiration to impact, Amanda Johnson has dozens of examples of people healing their stories through the process of writing. Founder of True to Intention, where authors discover how to create more empowering narratives, and co-founder of Saved by Story Publishing, Amanda Johnson partners with seekers and storytellers devoted to writing more authentic individual and collective stories. Amanda and her son Aaron will share their very different journeys of being shaped by story, wrestling back the pen to become co-authors of their magically ever afters, and using story and writing to help others to do the same. Her contact, the website is www.truetointention.com. And as I said, Amanda and Aaron are going to be doing a workshop this Saturday called You Can't Make This Story Up. Is it possible that the inspiration to write is actually an invitation to return home to oneself? In the 2-hour workshop, 3-hour workshop, the co-founders of Saved by Story Publishing, Amanda and Aaron Johnson, will not only share the framework they use and the tools required, they will guide you on the first leg of your magnificent journey. Please welcome Amanda and Aaron Johnson.
All right. Should I move this down so that I can be seen? It's going to be easy for everyone to see him.
You can be seen. We can see you. We can see you.
Okay. Excellent. Thank you. See how coordinated I am. It's almost like the belly rub and the chat. We'll see how it goes. Thanks for having us tonight. I'm super excited to be here and to talk about my love of story. And I'm even more excited to share the stage with my son because I've actually been speaking for about 15 years, but this is the first time that we get to speak together after writing a book last year. I promise you it's going to be a lot more fun with him here. So, let's see, where do I need this to go in order to move?
It's not you, it's me.
Okay. For now. Did all of you get maps? Okay, she's passing them out.
And I was going to say, I listened to the interview of you on your website, the YouTube interview, and it was fabulous. I
Oh,
don't
good.
think you listened to it, but it's really great.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm always excited to hear that because, you put those things out there, right? You put your creative process out there and sometimes you don't get any feedback, so I always appreciate it. Okay, so I'm clicking, there we go. Okay, so my first question is, where are you on this map? And you're probably wondering, I don't know because I've never seen this map before. So I'm gonna spend a few minutes explaining this map. This is something that I developed with Erin's help. We actually have 2 versions of it. This is the first. I own a company called True to Intention, and with True to Intention, I spend a lot of my life helping people develop powerful content, books, signature talks, curriculum events. And then over towards on the right side, you'll see Saved by Story. Saved by Story is a publishing house that you'll hear its conception story tonight from Erin. And it's a publishing house that we started last year, and it's been a really fun journey. And I've been watching people witnessing and walking alongside people on this journey for about 15 years now. And so we start out down here at the bottom left with inspiration and uncertainty. You know that moment, right? That moment where you get struck by like lightning, or maybe it came like a little whisper while you were coming out of a deep sleep. But you have that inspiration, and with it comes the, what do I do with this? Is this a book? Is it a screenplay? Is it a song? What am I supposed to do? Well, primarily I'm working with books or talks or curriculum, so that's going to be the long and short of what I have to offer tonight. But I think it's just about the creative process. So usually right after this, we move into what I call action from self-knowledge. This is the time frame where you're filling journals voraciously, right? You're just constantly filling them out. You've got Post-it notes everywhere because you don't want to forget that. You've got things stuck in your purse or your pocket. And this is where you're starting to have that feeling like it's like destiny, right? Like I've been inspired by this for a reason. All of a sudden, a lot of your experiences start to make sense, a lot of your expertise and those weird twists and turns and plot twists in your own story, you're like, maybe that's why, so that I could work on this. And then you keep going, lots of movement, and then you end up in upside down danger. Y'all know what that is. See, I didn't even have to explain it. This is that moment where you sit down at your computer and you're like, uh-oh, nothing's coming. You slammed into some sort of writer's block or a story wall or had some sort of collision. And you know what? Sometimes this even happens where has nothing to do with the creative process. I've seen it where people jump into a creative process and the rest of their life blows up. They have a health crisis. They have a relationship crisis. Anyone in here? Upside down danger. They can't focus. They can't figure it out. They can't organize it. They can't figure out how to do it powerfully. So they contact someone like me, or they join a writer's guild, where they're like, somebody help me, right? And then they move into safety and camaraderie. And this is the part where most of the content development gets done. And in my world, this is where most of the healing and transformation takes place too. Because what I learned very early on was that the writer's block had zero to do with a person's writing ability. It had everything to do with whatever story was coming up for them, or whatever story was the scariest one that they never wanted to tell, that Amanda was in the front of the room saying, hey, I think that might be the door in. No. So we do all this transformative work, get all of the content done, and now we're in redemption phase. Why redemption phase? Well, this is the part where the other shadows start to come up. Oh wait, now I have to share this with people and get feedback? I have to put this in front of an expert writer, editor, and have them tear it apart, and maybe I've been called the hacker a few times before in my editing days. You know, it's terrifying, right? Because it's one thing to show something to yourself. It's a whole other thing to reveal it to the world and put yourself out there. And so we have all of these shadows that start to arrive around visibility and social media, and oh my gosh, we could go on a list, and we have a list on Saturday at our workshop when we have more time to talk about it. And then we move, and this is the part where we're moving them all through this process of getting the content ready. And then there's faith and destiny. And this is that moment where, how many of you have actually gotten to this part where you've launched a creative project into the world and just kind of let it go? It's so scary, right? And what do you have to do? You have to go back to that first moment of inspiration, that moment where it felt like destiny, and all the little magical moments after until you hit that story wall. And you have to really rely on something kind of bigger than yourself. You might call it God, you might call it your higher self, you might call it your muse. I kind of don't care what you call it, but you know that in order to press send or submit, you have to trust in something bigger. And then there's impact through leadership in the top right, and this is where we're all trying to get, right? We want our words to mean something. We want to be able to do something in the world with our words that couldn't be done otherwise. And so sometimes for a lot of our clients, this is something gigantic. This is like we're changing the mental health system, or we're changing traditional education, or we're changing the way people look at suicide loss survivors, right? Like these big messages and system changes. But oftentimes it starts in the family, where people get through the creative process and they realize, oh, there's a part in my life that I actually haven't been leading. And they go back to work in their marriages, in their parenting, and in their workspaces. So this is the map. My question for you is, where are you in your creative process on this map? And let's see if we can get to the next one here. Nope. You might have to do this manually, buddy. Or someone. Thank you. Okay, so then the next question is, you can't see it up there, but it's what story has your answer in it? And this is the map that you're actually holding on to right now, so you can just kind of take a look at this. You'll see that it's the same exact map as far as the big stops, right? And inspiration and uncertainty all the way to impact through leadership. But along the road, instead of these things that you have to get done and processes that you have to complete, you'll see a bunch of little stories that we have illustrated and articulated. And that's because we believe that stories actually have the answers that we need to move from one place to the next. And that's the place that we're going to speak from tonight, telling you about our own personal stories. So you'll see that, Mike, I think you were saying something about, I'm so glad that they sat at their computer instead of going and eating potato chips, right? Well, in our world, sometimes these coaches say, put the computer away, go get some potato chips, and go watch a movie. And make sure that it's from this part on the map, because you need a conversation around destiny right now before you launch your book.
I love me some potato chips.
Netflix binging, sometimes it's the way, right? So tonight we get to share our journeys through story with you. We have very different journeys. Erin was mindfully raised on story. I did that on purpose once I figured out what I was doing. And she'll hear it tonight. And I was saved by story. And that did not happen on purpose. Well, not my purpose. A lot of it happened on accident until I figured out what was happening. And then I decided, you know what? I'm going to get creative with this process, and I'm going to figure out how to use it for myself, and then I'm going to teach it to other people. And then finally, you'll get that invitation to dive deeper with us on Saturday. So let's see here. Next. Before we get started, I know you all probably have exercises at the end, but we're going to mix it up a little because we like to break rules. We have a few questions for you because we believe story is the answer. So our goal is to kind of show you tonight that you already have an answer before you even hear our own stories. So what's your favorite story? This could be of all time. It could be right now. You really can't choose the wrong story. So just write down what it is, a movie, a book, a play. Don't overthink it. Gut level response. And then the second question, remember, don't overthink it. None of this, I don't want to hear the gears turning. This is a hard thing. Who is your least favorite character, the one you love to hate? Now that should come real quick. Okay, this could be a villain who makes your skin crawl or makes your blood boil, right? But it could also be a protagonist that just pisses you off Because why don't they keep getting it? Like, what is wrong with them? Okay, so whoever that is, go ahead and mark that down. The person you love to hate. I think we need our clicker. All right, there is a third question. Who's your favorite hero or shero? Remember, don't overthink it. No overthinking. That's where we mess things up. All right, so now pens down. Now you get to hear from my amazing son.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. I'm Aaron. Thank you all for joining us tonight. I'm really excited to be here. This is my first time doing this with my mom, but also speaking about my story personally, not writing it in a book. So it'll be very interesting. And my goal tonight for you hearing my story, which will make sense a little bit later, is for you to see a mirror for yourself in your own story, but also if you're a parent or a grandparent, what life looks like kind of being raised on story and what we mean by being raised on story. So I'm going to get started. Not at the very beginning, okay? So my conception story is really funny, but that's for another time. I'm going to start at around 2 or 3 when I started speaking. When I was born, my parents had a pretty big falling out with their religion, their spiritual community. And so I wasn't raised on the Bible kind of at that time. And that meant mom had to go to the grandparents and set some pretty good boundaries. Those boundaries were pretty clear. They were, you can talk to Aaron about what you believe, but you can't talk to him as though it's the objective truth, because he needs to be able to make up his own mind for himself as he hears from you. And so no one followed that rule, of course. I actually came home one day and I said, Mommy, why don't we have a Bible? And Mommy was pissed. Mommy was not happy. And before she could respond, Dad from the kitchen said, we do have a Bible. It's Avatar: The Last Airbender. Interesting. Anyone here ever watch Avatar: The Last Airbender? One of the greatest television shows ever made, in my opinion. But what was interesting is that that show had so many morals and values, but my dad, a guy in his late 20s, saw the value in those deep philosophical subjects that that show explored with children and those universal truths that it brought up, that it was that mirror, that it could provide that value of some kind. And so, and then around 7 or 8, I was a Harry Potter nerd, and still am, still my favorite movie series of all time. We were actually, me dressed up as a wizard there in the top right. I actually went to Comic-Con dressed up as Harry Potter once. And while we were watching The Sorcerer's Stone one time, my mom does this thing where she picks up the remote and she pauses the movie. And I roll my eyes and I sigh because she's about to ask me a question. And the question she asked me this time was, who's your favorite character in Harry Potter? And without thinking, my answer was Professor McGonagall. She was like, Professor McGonagall? Not Harry, not Ron, not Hermione, not Dumbledore, not like a main character. So she was puzzled. She didn't understand what was going on. And when I was 10, about to turn 11, I went to school, and my best friend at the time, he was turning 11. You know what that means. You get your Hogwarts letter in the mail. And my friend, he didn't get his Hogwarts letter. I was so bummed. And so I went home, and I'm like, Mom, my friend, he didn't get his Hogwarts letter. And that's when Mom got a little worried that this whole story thing was going a little bit too far. The lines of fiction and reality started to blur. But I knew deep inside, I remember knowing that I knew Hogwarts wasn't real. I really wanted it to be real, of course, like who didn't? But what she realized from Professor McGonagall and Hogwarts was that the reason I was connecting with them so much was because I wanted that in my life. I needed someone to embody Professor McGonagall. I needed a school that could teach me what I needed to become who I needed to be. So, after a whole lot of family drama. Anyone here ever deal with family drama? Yeah. At 13, we decided to move from Southern California to Beaverton, Oregon. And in that first year, I actually joined in 8th grade a public online homeschooling program, which I hated. It kind of killed my creativity. My love for learning really wasn't my thing. It was very robotic. And one of the courses I was taking was a career technical education course. And they were asking me these questions like, what kind of goals should you have? And the answers were small and manageable, or large and unmanageable. And growing up with entrepreneurs, visionaries my entire life, I knew that was a false dichotomy, and it made me kind of mad, because I knew you needed those large visions and those smaller, more manageable goals within them to reach those large visions. So as soon as Mom came out of her office, I said, Mom, they're treating me like a monkey. And that was the end of that program. Found another one the next year called Village Home. And the way I like to describe Village Home is kind of like a college for high school students. I got to go there, I got to pick the classes I wanted to take, I got to build my education curriculum, I got to decide how I wanted to learn in those classes. It was amazing. And I took a lot of extracurriculars. One of the extracurriculars I took was improv, one of my favorite classes. But in that class, 2 of my friends approached me after a performance that day. And they're still my best friends to this day. And they kind of like heavy-handedly recruited me into another class called mock trial at behest of the teacher. They said I didn't have a choice. I had to come and try it out, so I did. And that class was mock trial. If you don't know what mock trial is, it's this really nerdy thing where high school students and college students dress up as fake lawyers. They go into real courtrooms and they act out hypothetical cases against another team. And the team with the best performance and the best legal theory wins. And I loved that class so much. I loved the work itself, but what made it better were the people. And at that point, I realized the magic in that, and that it wasn't Hogwarts that made Hogwarts. It was the people and the camaraderie that you saw on the screen that made Hogwarts. And I finally found that after 14 years of not having that, is what I needed. And better yet, in the bottom left there, that's Deborah. She taught mock trial. She still does to this day. She is in a church at Oxford where they filmed most of Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone. She is a huge Harry Potter nerd. And better yet, she literally calls herself Professor McGonagall and dresses up as her. She runs the Harry Potter Club. And she embodied all of that for me. She was my Professor McGonagall in my Hogwarts. And I finally had both. I found a magical school, and I found the teacher that I needed. Another course I started taking was called the Human Spark. It's like a class that looked at human evolution from a few perspectives, from the past, and the present, and looking toward the future. And the teacher one day came in, brought this article, and the article said, my generation one day might be able to choose immortality because of how fast health sciences are advancing. And I thought that was really interesting. So I went in the car to go home with Mom, and she asked me how my day was, and my response is usually, it's okay. You know, most teenagers say that. But this time, I said, actually, my teacher brought up this very interesting thing. She said that we might be able to choose immortality one day, and her question for me was, would you actually do it? And it was a hard no for me. And the reason why, after thinking about it all day, was that after watching so many TV shows and movies and reading books about the subject and immortality, I noticed a pattern. I noticed a theme. And that was, when people have immortality, unless you do a lot of self-work, you're like a Vulcan from Star Trek, right? And you do kind of have immortality. The value of your life, the value of your time kind of diminishes because you don't have an expiration date. And I wasn't sure, knowing that I could trust myself with infinite time to be able to have the passion and the motivation that I would normally in an 80 to 90 year, hopefully, fingers crossed, lifespan. And that's when she realized this story thing is actually helping him delve into some deeper philosophical issues. And that's when we decided to write our book, A Religion, a Story. And in a week, we had that book outlined. And, we started writing it. It was pretty fun. I wrote chapters 1 through 4 pretty quickly, although it was kind of technical. It was really technical. It was dry, and I took it from a teacher perspective, right? And I got to chapter 5, and I could not write chapter 5. I would open my computer, not be able to write a word. I'm sure no one in here has ever experienced anything like that, right? No writer's block whatsoever. So I went to Mom, the book coach, and I said, Mom, what's wrong with me? I can't write this chapter. She said, I don't know. Well, what if you tried writing your personal stories into the book? And I said, no, that's stupid, no way. I will not be doing that. Not my personal life, I don't want that on paper. And I didn't know what that resistance was at the time. And so I finally cracked because a few weeks went by and I still couldn't do anything. So I did everything I could to avoid chapter 5. So I went to chapter 1, chapter 2, chapter 3, chapter 4. It made everything much better. The story flowed much better. It was a better experience delivering the concepts that I wanted to deliver with the power of my personal story. Then I got to chapter 5 again. And I realized what that resistance was really all about. You see, this chapter was called Villain Tells and Redemption, which meant a personal story of mine had to involve a villain in my life. And that villain, I knew immediately, but it wasn't the second grade bullies. It wasn't a girl that broke my heart. And it wasn't even the teacher who threw an object at my head across the classroom, which is another fun story for another fun time. It was my great-grandmother, who I lived the first 13 years of my life with, and we moved away from when we came to Oregon. And I knew exactly why, and we'll be getting into why a little bit later. And then I was 17, and I actually finished high school a year early. I got to my diploma, and at that time, you start thinking about, what are you going to do next? Are you going to go to college? What are you going to do? I started exploring college options, but I really didn't feel grounded in college. I knew college wasn't the right answer for me at that time. It still isn't right now. So I decided to learn the way that I wanted to learn. I started a business. All the clients came right then. And I started doing administrative management, project management. Everything seemed to fit right together. And even the logo there in the bottom left came together so easily. It actually looks like it follows my signature. My A looks like the C, and I even do have little caterpillar ears because my mom, her whole brand is butterflies, so I'm her little caterpillar. And so it felt like destiny, and it put me on this path that I am today. It was perfect. And then what we started to do after we finished the first draft of our book was we actually started working together in our businesses. So myself, my mom, and my aunt, who's a graphic designer and website designer, all started working together to help my mom's book coaching clients self-publish their books. All of our superpowers combined. And we actually had 2 clients in particular in the year of 2021 who decided to go with hybrid publishers, but wanted us to help them kind of as consultants. And so those projects were dumpster fires with the publishers. They were not fun, and we actually ended up carrying a lot of them to the finish line. And that Christmas, I said to Mom, Mom, we already do all the things. Why don't we just start a publishing house? Mom was like, just a publishing house. Okay, sure. She did not like the idea, but in a day we had the logo design and we had the partners to help us support it, which is amazing. And the reason that that's important in my story is because I actually had a lot of experiences as a kid in other businesses and other communities with other people that didn't work out very well because I didn't have the magical people that I needed, that I didn't have the wisdom or the experience that was required. But this time everything fell together, and we're still doing it today. And so that's kind of caught up to where I am today, and I promise it'll make a whole lot more sense why you just listened to me tell you my entire life story in just a moment, but for now, I'll hand it back to Mom.
He's awesome, right? I mean, I know I'm biased. I'm so biased. But what he didn't tell you is that if you ever send him an email at Amanda, or at Aaron, Saved by Story, what is our email address? Aaron@savedbystory.house. You will get an email back where his title is the wizard. He's actually the wizard. He did it. He went to the magical school and he did it. So that's what it's like to be raised by story. What's it like to be saved by story? I bet many of you have been saved by a story, right? You're probably aware of several of them. But what would happen if you expected to be saved by story every time? I had no idea this was a thing. And when Aaron was born, I had 2 storylines running. The first one was bound for greatness. This is what I heard from everybody. I was a star student. I went to a classic books honors program. I killed it. Anything that I did so well. Great daughter, amazing big sister, you name it, raising the most amazing young son. But actually, this was a real storyline. When I got off this roller coaster and I looked at this picture, I started bawling in the middle of California Adventure because I was like, oh my God, this is my life, actually. My son looks a little bit scared about the family that he's dropped into, right? And you can see my husband and I with the burden of the world on our shoulders because we lost our faith and we lost the foundation of our marriage, and we were quickly losing mental and emotional health and physical health too. And so that's what Aaron dropped into. Lucky him. I don't know why he did that. And so the moment where that really began to turn around was this moment where I was working as a writing instructor online. It's amazing. Like, it's one of the best educators I've ever met in my entire life. She'd written a book and she asked me to edit it. So I got to edit it. We met for lunch and she asked me, Amanda, what do you think of the book? And I said, what does it feel like to have written a book where the person who starts the book isn't the person who ends it? Because they've experienced such transformation through reading your words. Like, what does that feel like? And without even blinking, she said, oh, it feels amazing. When are you gonna write your book? And I just started glitching because not only had it never occurred to me to ever write a book, but I didn't even like reading them that much. Says the book coach. I know, it's crazy. They gotta be good for me to read them, I'm just saying. And so, she asked me, she said, I hear what you're saying, but I really think you have something of value to give to the world today. What is it? And when she said that, I started crying and I gave her a hug and I got in the car and I drove about 45 minutes down a long, windy mountain like an idiot, bawling my eyes out, asking this question and hoping that there was gonna be an answer. And about halfway home, as the answer, I had this flashback of Aaron, about this age. And I'd been doing everything that I could to not limit this kid. Like, I did not want him to end up like me. How can I create a powerful self-image? How can I not limit him? How can I keep him from the pain that I'm in? I was using everything I learned in child development, everything in psychology, everything in my teacher training classes. And one day, he showed me that it was working. He broke a mirror in my grandmother's bathroom. We were living with her at the time. And she screamed, "You're such a bad boy. Get out of here." Now, the one thing that you were never, ever supposed to say to my son, and everyone knew this, everyone was on notice, you were never supposed to call him bad. Because the one thing that had happened to me that I knew for sure was that my worth had been accidentally tied to my behavior. Oops. But it was creating so much pain. And I was like, over my dead body, will this happen to my kid? And so I stopped what I was doing, was going down the hallway to do something terrible to my grandmother. I don't know what my plan was. But when I got to the end of the hallway, I saw him with his hands on his hips and he said, "Grandma, I'm not bad. I just made a bad choice and I'm sorry." And I was like, what? It's like 3. My work is done. It's working. So there I am, driving on my way home, wondering, what purpose do I have in life? I've been totally disconnected from purpose. But you know what? I've been doing this okay. In fact, now that I think about it, has this ever happened to you? Where it starts to occur to you that everyone in your life has kind of been asking you to do this for a while? A lot of people were asking me, like, how are you doing this? How is he 3 years old and he's been through the terrible twos and you've never had a power struggle? I was using all my tools. Nobody knew that. It wasn't common sense. Okay. So I get home and I tell my husband I need 30 more minutes before I get trapped back by my life. And so I start writing. And I don't know if this has happened to you, but I start writing out my ideas. I'm gonna write out the story. It's a book series. Oh my gosh, it's a book series. Oh, it's a training and consulting company for parents. Oh, I'm working next to this teacher from The Secret. What the actual heck am I saying right now? Because 45 minutes ago on the road, I felt hopeless, powerless. And it was like switching universes. So I called the one person that I was pretty sure wasn't going to call me crazy because she was my client. Oops. She was my client, and she was all about potential, all about breaking the limiting beliefs, all about, everything that I was trying to do. Of course she was put in my life at this time. Of course. And so I told her, I have this idea, law of attraction for little ones. And I want to attract a teacher from The Secret. Do you think I'm crazy? She was like, heck no. How soon do you want to do that? I said, as soon as possible, because this feels amazing. Inspiration, action, right? Oh, so exciting. 3 months later, almost to the day, through a series of insanely synchronistic events, I walk into a Sizzler with my family, and my husband goes, babe, turn around. I turn around, and Lisa Nichols is standing right behind me. And she invites me to a workshop that changed my life forever. And so I'm living in the magic, man. I get invited to a facilitator program. I'm going to learn how to facilitate transformation because I should do that if I'm going to run a training and consulting company, right? Plus, I'm going to build a relationship with this woman. It'll be a good partnership. This makes perfect sense. I've got it all figured out. I get into this room, and I just fall apart. All of that high performance stuff, gone, out the window. I'm supposed to memorize curriculum. I can't even barely read this stuff. What just happened? Well, what just happened actually was I slammed into my story because this was my first experience with what we call narrative medicine. This was the first moment where I stepped into a room, and instead of seeing teachers with PowerPoints and bullet points and worksheets and here's what to say and here's what to give back to me, I watched people use their story to open portals of healing and possibility for teens and me. And I sat in the room and I cried for hours and hours and hours, and I did all of my own work because there was no way I could get to the front of the room in the pain that I was in. Remember that roller coaster ride? I had to deal with all of that stuff. You can see this picture. Oh my gosh, I was so angry. And these people, it took me 3 years to finish a 1-year program. 3 years. That's how tied up in knots I was. But I spent hundreds of hours watching this magic of story take place in these rooms. And it was all I wanted to do for the rest of my life. I even forgot about my book project for a while. Anyone ever done that? Or you get involved in something else and you're like, oh shoot, yes, that book thing. That's why you gotta have an Ursula in your world, because she would call me up. I swear she calendared that thing. Like every 6 months, how's the book coming? It's not coming. I'm upside down. And then I'm busy. Because now I'm using story, and now something starts to open. I'm starting to heal, and opportunities are opening. So Lisa invites me to speak on her Speak and Write to Make Millions stage. Hey, your first time speaking, how about 250 people after Lisa Nichols? You all seen her speak? It was crazy. And then I got to begin, facilitating my own workshops and helping people through content development. And that's where things got really, really real. Because that's when I got to see the power of writing. The power of people putting pen to paper and seeing things that they never wanted to see before. And definitely didn't want to share with anybody. Have you ever had that moment where you write it and you go, oh, delete? Erase it as quickly as possible, right? And I started to see the magic that was possible when they started to really lean in and tell these scary stories inside of a safe space where they could be witnessed. And all of a sudden, instead of the backlash that they were expecting, people leaned in and said, oh my gosh, and you're still like a productive human? How did you do it? Their story changed. And as they wrote, they stopped being the character being spun around in their story. They stopped being the narrator just watching it from above. They started being the co-author of it. They started to figure out these are the moments where I keep losing my power. Even still to this day, I'm writing this book about overcoming this, and I still have this one little part in my story where I'm messing it up. Not anymore. They got to change all of that because of the safety and camaraderie. And so, man, I'm telling you, we've got like 3-4 years of pure magic. And I mean, clients coming in, helping me heal my own stories. I mean, you couldn't have lined it up any better. People helping me deal with my religious trauma, people helping me deal with my marriage stuff, people helping, they were all experts coming to me to help them sort out their information. And I was learning the entire time and going home and using all of it. It's the best, it is literally the best way to do your self-work, is to help other people with their stories. or the fastest way to go crazy if you don't want to do your own work. So amazing opportunities happening. You know, I have workshops that I'm facilitating, retreats, people healing their stories, big 200-person events, like way beyond the dream that I had in the room all those years before. And I even finished the book, but it wasn't the little ones. It wasn't for that one. It became for the moms, the upside down mommies. So I finished and I launched this book. And something happens and I realize, you know what? I keep reaching mountaintops in my work. And every time I reach one of these mountaintops, it's like someone comes by and cuts me out at the knees. Anyone ever that's happened before, where you're just like, I'm right here, and then the craziest thing happens? Well, the first time, the craziest thing cost me $100,000. It was a massive betrayal that I wish I could say I didn't see coming, but I did. And the second one was an attack that actually leveled my physical health. And so after about 2 years of pinnacle moments, I had the speaking career, I had the business, the funnel, I had the book now, and all my coaches were saying, go, go, go. It's time, impact, income, 7 figures, do it. You'll change the world. This is what I wanted to do. And I was thinking, I might die. Because the first time was a financial fallout, the second time was a physical fallout. What's next? I need to figure out what's going on underneath this and heal that so that I can actually do what I want to do without so much collateral damage in my life. So I go to work. In fact, I closed down my business. I only worked with the people who very obviously were put in my path to help me with the next message. And this is where a story really started to take a turn for me, because I would now, I'd spent 3 years in magic in my business. I would walk into this labyrinth, I would ask questions, I would get answers, I would know the right next step. Has anyone ever been through one of those phases? Like, you just want them to last forever. And so now I'm sitting on a meditation pillow asking for questions, asking for answers, and I'm not getting them. So I'm trudging through my day trying to figure out this story, and my son comes home, and he says, Mom, one of my friends was telling me about this really cool series that they're watching. I think we should check it out. We turn it on, Merlin, and he says, what do you think about it? And I'm thinking, holy crap, that first episode had the answer to the question that I had on my meditation pillow this morning. That's crazy. I wonder if that's going to continue. Well, it did, because now I'm not getting answers from anywhere else but stories, and I'm just letting them come to me and give me the answers that I need. And so I had Merlin that helped me figure out the magic and the leadership. How are these two things supposed to play together? We need them to become friends, right? And then I have Korra, the next airbender, and moments of watching her just be so torn up and feeling like she can't get back in the ring again, but she's gotta. But now she has community around her taking care of her while she figures it out. And then, Maleficent and Frozen. Okay, here, villains have backstories. Now I can start to figure out this whole villain and hero thing, right? These shows are starting to help me sort through, and now I'm being saved by it, even though he got to be raised by it. So I start to figure it out, and I realize, okay, it's the sacrifice story. Because when I was that age, this little girl right here, my dad probably, I'm gonna give him the benefit of the doubt and say that he was doing the absolute best he could with what he was given. He sacrificed me for the family and for his comfort. And I took all of the burden, all of the responsibility in the family. And I promptly, when I started to work on my own business, decided to take that sacrifice motif. And so I was overworking, and I was sacrificing my physical health and all of the things for this thing that I thought was the most important. So I figured out that I was living inside of this toxic family system, took Aaron, took my husband, and we moved to Oregon, so far away that I couldn't go back to my, can you come over and watch her for a few hours? Nope, can't. I'm 1,000 miles away, sorry. Sometimes you gotta do that to break a script, because you know yourself, right? It's too hard. And so I got back to work. I got back on stages. I finished my second book, Upside Down Messenger. And when we're talking about faith and destiny, there's this moment that, it was one of those moments that I was talking to one of my clients, and she said, you know what, Amanda, I know that you were involved in the education system and you like jumped out of it really fast at one point. And I said, yes, because I burned out in like 6 months. And she said, well, I'm wondering if you can take your narrative medicine stuff that you're doing with people and apply it in a room with a bunch of special education teachers who are burning out like too fast. Can you help them with their personal narrative? And I was like, sure. And as I'm driving up the mountain in Lake Arrowhead, I'm thinking, I'm driving back to 5 minutes away from where I grew up. And I'm working in the same county that I wanted to make an impact in, but I'm doing this in an entirely different way, with more of my superpowers than I would have been able to use in a classroom. It felt like destiny. Okay, so impact through leadership. This is the last piece here for me. Because leadership was thrust upon me. You know how some people, like, they work to get to leadership? Nope. I was supposed to be a leader from the time that I was young, and then when I became a helper to help people get their projects done, I became a leader. Oops. And all of this magic is happening with these clients, and I'm realizing I'm getting healing. They're propelling me forward. I'm propelling them forward. They don't know that they've been helping me. I haven't been telling them, right? Those coach ethics. And so I decided to invite 20 of them to write a book with me and to tell the story of what happened for them. And that I would tell my story of why they were in my life at that time and how they helped me. So we work on this story. Aaron and I finish A Religion of Story. And of course, the publishing house happens. That was thrust upon me. You did that. But it was okay. But you know what? It was the scariest thing for me because that leadership thing, what happens to someone who wants to become a leader when they have a story about sacrifice running underneath? Now I'm responsible for people. I'm responsible for handling a business in relationships with family and loved ones. Like 4 of our partners are clients turned friends turned business partners. That's so many layers of possible messing up that I could do as a leader. And so I'm like really trying to sort myself out as this is happening because I know it's destiny, it's obvious, but I have all kinds of resistance. And so I leaned into my favorite stories, Yellowstone. Let's talk about loyalty without fear or power struggles, right? In a family business. Oh, how about Ted Lasso? That came out so much before then, but I never heard about it until the moment I needed it. How do you build culture? And also, how do you keep accountability? That's my one thing with Mr. Ted. Accountability. So I have all these people who say, I believe in the world that you're gonna build. I wanna help. And I'm like, I still have the sacrifice story. So end of last year, this gentleman finds me through a series of really weird events. And his first words to me are, Amanda, I think you're the one. And I'm like, the one for what? We were supposed to talk about businesses. He goes, you're supposed to help me with my project. Can I send you my outline? I said, sure. And I open up the outline and it's 800 pages long. And it's the first in 6 books. Right. I read this outline and I cry my way through this outline. It has no scene work, no emotional triggers, nothing. And I'm bawling my eyes through it. And I call him up and I said, I have to work on this project. And he said, you were emotional about it? And I said, this is my life story. It's generational sacrifice. And I got to lean in. So about 6 months into working on this project with him, he asked me to work on a scene that he couldn't quite do. And it was the scene that I needed to heal my story. Put me in bed for 2 or 3 days. And so now, when someone asks, now what, Amanda? What's next? I have to tell people about this. I have to do more of this and talk about what happens if we really lean into story and we stop blindly consuming them, whether that's a book or a play or the TV series. What if we paid attention to, like, why have 3 people told me about this series in the last 24 hours? Maybe I should check that out. Maybe there's some sort of orchestration happening to give me an answer. And so, story is the answer, but the journey is not pretty. It's easy. It's not pretty either. Super messy. And we have this one story that I want Aaron actually to share because this is the story of him and his great-grandmother. So he gets stuck and he comes to me, and the part that he didn't tell was that I told him to put his personal story in there from the very beginning, and he was like, nah. And then he's such a good writer that it doesn't matter. It's super technical, but it's beautiful. He's so smart. I was almost about ready to let it go. And then he got stuck, and I'm like, oh, buddy, you're gonna have to do the personal thing. So he does that, and then he gets stuck on this story. But this is what's happening in the background. Before, we were at the table together, working, we're drinking our coffee, getting our writing on, and all of a sudden he starts disappearing out of our writing time. Do you ever have a writing buddy that's like stuck? They just start to not show up? That was him. And I felt like, okay, I'm a mom here, I'm a book coach, I'm a co-author. What do? I have to just wait and let it happen. And eventually one day, it happened.
It did happen. Yeah, my great-grandmother. So when she started getting older, into her 90s, she actually started developing dementia. And folks who start developing dementia can get kind of mean sometimes. And so our life with my great-grandmother in that house, even though she was so loving and so sweet and so generous for so long, became kind of abusive emotionally. She made threats financially and actually physically, kick us out of the house. Not physically, she wasn't going to do anything with her walker, thankfully, but so yeah, that was the story that I had to heal through. And up here is what I actually wrote in the first draft of our book about the time that we decided to leave and told her. So I'm going to read it for you. After using a few tissues and 10 minutes or so of crying, Grandma abruptly stood up from her chair, grabbed her walker on wheels, and sobbed her way down the hall into her den. After breathing a collective sigh of relief, Teddy, a family friend of ours who helped take care of our great-grandmother while we moved away, stood up and followed. The days following that conversation and leading up to the move were no easier. They were full of cold shoulders, loud sighs, tears, and perhaps worst of all, the silent treatment. Why are you doing this to me? Why couldn't you move somewhere closer? Why are you leaving the state? Don't you love me? After being inundated with these questions and watching her behavior, I started to see a different person than I had before. This person who I had lived with and loved my whole life began to guilt trip us at every turn, and my playful, generous, and loving great-grandmother had become dimmed by her past, her pain, her fears, and her cognitive decline. She became the manipulative Mother Gothel to our Rapunzel, which is a reference to the movie from Disney, Tangled. We knew she loved us, and we loved her, too. But when it came time to live our lives, to seek adventure and pave our own path, we became her villain. And as hard as it was to accept, she had become the unexpected villain of our story, and I wanted to rewrite it.
So I was, right? I was sitting on the couch. He was in his room hiding. I was sitting on the couch when he sent me this text. And then I was crying on the couch. Because this was the culmination of everything that I had seen in Story, right? Story is the answer. First of all, it was a language, right? At 13, when we left, he didn't have the framework to be able to say, Grandma is becoming abusive. Nor did his little ego want to admit that. But he could admit by watching Tangled that old lady really scared him in the same way that his grandma did, right? It became our shorthand. We were always using stories to talk about how we were feeling. And so then it became medicine, right? We knew she loved us and we loved her too, but it's that hero and villain thing, right? We're so binary. We can only see it's this way or it's this way, when in reality, so much of reality is both and. And he really needed that because he didn't want to look at her as a villain because he thought that he couldn't see her as the hero that she'd been for the first 12 years of his life. It was too much for his little mind. And then there was the invitation. And the invitation of Story is to reconnect with ourselves and each other, using it. That's absolutely what he did, because I had seen his light start dimming when he turned 7, and she really started her decline. And for 6 years, I was like, what is going on with this kid? And then when we left and he got into his magical school and the lights came back on, I was like, oh. And then he finished this story, and then the lights came all the way back on. And so it's also a journey. So 2 minutes after I finish bawling my eyes out, I get the F you and you're healing through writing bullshit, Mom. I'm having a true to intention client moment. And that's the moment where I decided, you know what? Maybe he needs to be part of the You Can't Make This Story Up book. So he wrote his own chapter in that as well. So back to you. What story has your answer? Well, I think that you've already given yourself the answer. So back to your questions, the answers to the questions that I asked earlier. The first one, what's your favorite story? This usually clarifies your message or your mission. This is like the legend. So if you look at the story that you chose, does it reflect your mission or your message that you're working on? It likely holds the problem in the world that pisses you off or breaks your heart. It likely contains some of the solutions or approaches that you are bringing to the world. I don't mind. Wait until it all gets up there, and then you can. It likely, the heroes usually display qualities that you have naturally or have developed through similar experiences. My example is Footloose. Because you guys, you can't make this up, right? I was 4 years old when I got to watch Footloose with my older cousins. The very next month, I was moved to a very small religious community that wouldn't let me dance. I swear to God. You can't make it up. The universe gave me the answer before I had the problem. What am I doing with my life today? My message and my mission is reconnecting people with their true intention under the story they've been told about themselves, their higher power, and the world. Does it make sense? What you wrote down? All right, let's see. Let's get to the second one. Who is your least favorite character of all time? The one you love to hate. This usually clarifies the story that's sabotaging the progress of your message or your mission. And so your least favorite character often reminds you of the person or maybe a system or a paradigm that originally wounded you. Sometimes it's the embodiment of a paradigm you're here to change. You hate that person because, gosh darn them, everyone like them has messed everything up. Or maybe they remind you of a person or a situation in your present life that you need to confront. I love it. I love watching shows with my son now because he's ahead of me. He'll be like, Mom, why do you think you chose that mom story? What do you mean? Well, all your mom stuff that you're working on right now. Oh my God, you're right. I will watch it again. Or maybe it represents a part of yourself with superpowers that you've dismissed because you decided you never wanted to be like them, right? Maybe they're a narcissist, and so you don't take up any space in the world, but really you should. My example, the dad in Footloose, obviously, total tyrant. The family and religious narrative of fear, sacrifice, and duty over desire. I was getting the answer before I knew the problem. Is that insane or what? All right, number 3. Who is your favorite hero or shero of all time? This usually clarifies the next step toward your message or mission, literally the answer. So they often embody the quality or superpower you admire because you need them. Words, they often give you the words. You ever watch a show and just think, wow, the emotional intelligence of the people writing these shows. I wish I could say that sometime. And then we go back to our lives and we say the same stupid crap over again and keep the cycles going instead of, I'm gonna try that next time. Sometimes they're scripts or behaviors. Sometimes it's healthy awareness and management of shadows or vulnerabilities. Maybe they know their stuff. For me, Aragorn is one of these in Lord of the Rings, right? He was like, I do not want to be king because all of my people have messed up. All of them. I can't trust myself. My example, Ren, he used their own story to show them the way. Guess what I'm doing with my life, guys? And Aragorn watched his genetic shadow and led by elevating the least likely. So all of these stories came at times that I needed them. So now the exercise is for you, and I know we have about 10 minutes left. Is that right? For time? I saw in my notes a little Q&A, so we can use that time to talk about your answers, or you can ask your questions. think that's it. Yeah, I'd love to know what answers story gave you, or what other questions you have for us. Thank you.
I know I've experienced that when certain questions, then you're watching a movie or a TV show and somebody says the thing that you're like, oh my God, why did I think of that? You know, kind of thing. So I can't think of any specific examples, but yeah, a lot of them definitely. I love Avatar.
Yes.
You know, a friend of mine said to me, we watch it every year as a family.
Yep.
I'm like, what?
Yes, we do.
That's a great idea.
At least once. Mm-hmm.
At least once.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So, one of my favorites.
And you know, I was just talking to a friend last week who I've known for 20 years. I met her in that training program. And I was asking her what she was watching. And she kind of got quiet and kind of caved in a little. And I'm like, come on, what are you watching? And so she told me, and I'm thinking about the themes, like that makes perfect sense with what's going on in her life. And she said, you think I'm trying to work through my dad's stuff? And I'm like, military and revenge? Hard yes, you are working through dad's stuff. And it was funny because we had a conversation for about 10 or 15 minutes, and later she sent me a text and said, you know, thank you for bringing me into thinking like this, because I think about the danger for me. I'm single. I'm in a hard space in my life, and at night I'm watching vengeful TV. She said the potential for shame is so real. But you just gave me permission to realize that this is actually a way for me to work something out. If I really pay attention and stay with it and let the emotions happen and sort through scripts and behavior, she was like that could have gone really wrong. It could have even messed with my recovery. And I was like, right?
Thank you for your vulnerability, especially in light of today's world. What's interesting, and I've noticed in the media, especially over the last couple of months, because people are launching in the fall, and what's missing in our world is connection and belonging. And part of that is because, well, obviously after the pandemic, that hiding and not wanting to share family secrets, and I think there's a lot of wounded people that are looking for somewhere where they can connect. And with social media, absolutely perfect.
Yeah.
For a lot of people, I'm not saying that, but there's a lot of, especially younger people. And I want to thank you for leading the way.
Thank you. Thank you. That connection piece, that invitation piece is real. I mean, last week we're watching a show, and my husband and I, and he doesn't know it, but at night before I'm going to sleep or in the morning before I'm getting to work, I'm rewatching 2 of the episodes. And it's because there's medicine in it for me, but I can't figure it out. And so after about 10 days of this, I decide to courageously step into it with my husband and say, okay, so you know what's going on in my life and career. It's all in upheaval, by the way. It's all in transformation right now. And I said, you know what's going on, and you know those 2 episodes. Can you help me? And this man, he's been listening. I didn't know he was listening, but he's been listening to us. And he's like, okay, which character are you the most connected with? And what was it that he said? And he leaned in with me. And he said, the obvious thing is the attachment stuff. You get really attached to someone and then they disappear out of your life. And you've been saying that for 20 years with me. And I'm like, yeah, but I don't feel that anymore. Like, you say that and I don't feel it. Can you, let's keep going. And he tries 3 or 4 different things. And he goes, the only other thing that I can think of is the meaning and purpose. Like, why was he going to get up in the morning after this? And when he said that, I started bawling in the middle of the kitchen and wondering why I started this conversation 20 minutes before a client call. But for 20 minutes, he sat with me and asked me, I didn't even know that you were having a meaning and purpose situation here. And I'm like, yeah, because the first 20 years of my career were driven by sacrifice. And if I don't have that story driving my engine anymore, what's driving my engine? I'm literally waking up why should I do this? Cognitively, I have all the answers. I want other people to have the freedom that I have, but the engine is not there. And I couldn't put that together without asking him the question and using the language of story and having him lean in and have it enabling me to get the medicine. And by the end, I felt so seen by him. I mean, I was like, this is actually the exact reason why I'm getting up in the morning, because I want everyone to have moments like this with their loved ones, where they have little kids going through something at school and they know something's going on. You can't figure that out, but what if you sat next to them on the couch and asked them, okay, what's going on with this character? Why do you think they're behaving this way? They'll tell you exactly what's going on in their minds and hearts and at school without knowing that they're doing it. So, thank you. Any other questions, comments, or snide remarks? We like those too.
Amanda and Erin, do you want to talk a little bit about what you're going to do on Saturday in the workshop?
Sure. Okay, so back to this map, right? We have this map that you're looking at. It shouldn't take me this long to get back to it. There. We're gonna work people through the map. And so one of the things that we like to do is, talk about some of my clients' stories and those you can't make this story up moments where people realized, oh, this is the reason why I can't move that forward. So we'll share some of those stories, but really the goal is to help you get from wherever you are to the next space. And we're going to use story to do that, and we're also going to be working through some of the more tactical things. Because, if you haven't published a book, if you haven't given it to an editor, if you haven't done these things before, there's so much unknown that you just don't know how to step into it. And so part of what we're going to be doing is exposing some of the how and helping to ask the questions that'll help you get to the root fears, maybe, or stories that are keeping you from finishing what you want to finish.
I wanted to point out too, because when I first learned about what you were doing, I thought it was mostly that you did memoir. But it turns out your clients do all kinds of things, fiction and nonfiction, because they're working out whatever's going on in whatever story they're creating, as well as, and I thought that was really interesting, because I know in my young adult fiction series, I was working, not even realizing it until later, I was working out a lot of my own stuff.
Yeah, and sometimes you don't even know. I mean, one of our partners, and she's told this story in public, so it's okay for me to tell. One of our partners is a psychologist, a psychotherapist, and so she walked in and I told her, we do a lot of narrative medicine here, and I'm like scared because this is a professional therapist. Like, she has a license, and I'm thinking she's like watching everything that I'm doing so carefully. And she ends up becoming a really good friend, but she's like, yeah, I don't think my story really has anything in it. Like, it's really, it's more about my work life. And I'm like, sure, yeah, maybe, okay. But she leaned in, she did all the story healing retreats, she really was willing to see something. And we get to a retreat in person, and she's having nightmares every night. And I'm like, trying to lean in, no, it's not connected, it's not connected. And so she's so stuck on this chapter that should have been the easiest chapter. Anyone been there? This should have been the easiest chapter. She's like, I've done this a million times, what's wrong with me? And I said, why don't you jump forward to another scene in the book and kind of, in my mind, what I should have said was get a dopamine hit. Like, do something that you feel good about and then come back and work this harder part. Or maybe it will expose something that you need over here that you don't see yet. And she says, okay. She chose the worst chapter, like the hardest, most excruciating chapter to write. And I'm watching her sweat, and she's holding her stomach, and she's like, I don't know what's happening. She's writing. And she's writing about generational trauma and secrets that have been held. And she's like, I don't know what that was about, but you're right. I feel better. I can go back and write this now. So she's all cleared up. She goes home. 2 weeks later, she gets a phone call from a family member. A giant generational secret just erupted out of the family. And I'm like, is it possible that, she's a Jungian psychologist, is it possible that maybe you were processing some of that material so that this could happen. And she was like, I cannot believe that. So, I mean, even if it's not your own stuff sometimes, you're certainly working through something.